And thank you everyone for joining us today on our webinar on online advertising IPR, how to promote responsible advert placement in association with the European Gaming and Betting Association. Like I said, we are Big CO Gambling Compliance, and we provide legal and regulatory intelligence to the global gambling market. My name is Harrison Sayers and I'm a reporter. And today we're going to be looking into websites that violate intellectual property rights. In particular, this is by rebroadcasting pay TV feeds of live football. And this has become a significant thorn in the side of the media and sports industry. In 2018, a collection of organizations, including the EGBA, signed an MOU designed to limit advertising on websites and mobile applications that infringe copyright or disseminate counterfeit goods. White Bullet, we're joined by Philip Petru today, have been commissioned by the EC to track the process of this MOU. And in 2019, data seen by Vixio sent over by them showed that IP infringing websites were down in the first quarter of 2019, and the number of overall gambling ads only fell by 3% after the agreement was signed. A more recent study by the EU watchdog appears to show that 55% reduction in the number of major brand gambling ads appearing on websites known to be infringing on intellectual property, and the declining number of gambling ads occurred despite advertising across all sectors increasing by 26% on the same website. So today we're going to be finding out a bit more about what actions gambling operators, regulators and politicians are taking to reduce this number, and what role technology is playing in tackling this issue. So to kick things off, Angelique has prepared a presentation for us, which you would like to start now.
Many thanks, Harrison. Good morning to all. I'm pleased to be with you this morning, so many thanks for inviting me. So yes, I would like to briefly, explain you the MOU on online advertising on IPR. And that's an industry-led initiative facilitated by the European Commission. So I just also wanted to flag that the Commission is not a signatory, but is acting as a honest broker in order to facilitate, the cooperation under the MOU, to organize the meetings, to ensure that all signatories are acting constructively and in a good faith. And so the MOU was signed in 2018, and maybe we could go to the next slide, please. So it was signed in 2018, and the main objective of the MOU, as you said, Harrison, is to limit the placement of advertising of IPR infringing websites on mobile applications. So we signed it, it was signed in 2018 by a good number of signatories among advertisers, advertising intermediaries, and industry association. And as said, today we have already we have 2 signatories with us, with White Bullet and Advert, 2 active signatories. But now we have 29 signatories, so acting under this MOU. In 2020, the Commission published the first overview report of this industry-led initiative. It shows positive results. So only after less than 2 years of activity. And so far, we have published by the Commission and by the EU IPO, EU Intellectual Property Office, 3 monitoring studies. Were provided as a contractor by White Bullet, and Philip will explain you later. So we have already a good number of figures of data to already show, what has been the impact of the MOU on the online advertising market, and also we added a bit, but I will add later on that. Next slide, please. So as I said, we published the first report on the functioning of the MOU in 2020, and it was based only on the period between June 2018 and June 2019, especially for the data. So overall, the signatories considered that it's a positive experience, it's a positive initiative. So we had very good, good assessment on that, and in particular because they consider that this MOU helps them to find out about good practices, to share expertise, on different areas. On there, I would like to mention, for example, on streetborne safety protection, on transparency through the supply chain, on that all underline that it's quite still complex, mainly because of, there are a lot of actors on this supply chain. They also talk about third-party verification on measurement, contractual protection, technology and solutions to detect and prevent misplaced ads over the supply chain, and also participation in certification program. And finally, this MOU help to raise awareness among the different actors along the supply chain. And signatories also were really active about communication, so they ensure communication among their own network. On there, I know Egba through Daniele is very active because we are here today actually. But they really, communicate internally, externally, in meetings, in events, etc. So this really help also to really explain how we can remove IP infringing websites through payment of advertising. On all that, also I wanted to say that it was also built by the Commission also through the follow the money approach. So that's very important, and I will come that also later. So next slide, please. So during this first assessment, we ask signatories also to, I think it's not the, yeah, it's also it's the right slide. So we ask them also to to assess the cooperation on the initiative, but also to provide us with some follow-up actions, what to do next with this initiative. So I just put the main, let's say the main titles because it's a bit more detailed, but we will talk about that later. So just to say that signatories want to dig on the scope, meaning that we maybe during the first years of the initiative focused on the websites, but they also, for example, want to dig on mobile apps. So that's what we are going to do. They also want to have a deeper look at the different technologies on tools available on the market that might not be aware still what you were, but they want to know, to share expertise and to share information on that. We are continuing, as I said, to monitor the impact of the MOU on the online advertising market. So I put the link to the 3 published studies so far. And as I said also, yeah, we consider this and signatories consider that this initiative is very important to continue on the follow the money approach to IPR enforcement. And there, I would like to highlight that since the second monitoring study, we also add, how to assess that the counterfeiters, the pirates, are getting money through advertising. So now we have concrete, we have figures. And the signatories also want to continue exchange of good practices on sharing of expertise. They also want to have good discussion with national EU on international cooperation. On there, for example, I would like to mention that we have the World Intellectual Property Organization participating, intervening in nearly all of the meetings because they are also managing a tool, a database under this scope. So they are always, sharing updates on their own initiative. But we have also some authorities, for example, from France and from Italy, also intervening to increase cooperation with the signatories. And finally, signatories want to continue on, to increase communication on awareness raising, in particular among advertisers, but also all the different actors of the advertising supply chain on the general public. Next slide, please. So as regards the next step, I'm not going to detail too much, but just to say that, as I said, we signatories continue to discuss, implement, and monitor the follow-up actions. So in particular, sharing expertise, strengthening cooperation with public authorities, and raising awareness, so at national, EU, and international level. They also want to continue the monitoring and quantifying the evolution of online advertising on IPR infringing website over time. So to be able, to have comparison. We also add in this monitoring studies estimation of ad revenues of IPR infringing website owners. So that's a very important point. And lately, two major things were also added in these monitoring studies. So it was a mobile website ecosystem and the in-app ad monitoring. So they were added in the 2021 ad monitoring program. So as I said, through these monitoring studies, we started with a kind of pilot project because it was the first go. But now we are really building a methodology on new areas each time we publish a new study. And finally, as regards the extension of MOU participation, so signatories called for targeted expansion. So they consider that there are still some companies and trade associations involved in the digital advertising supply chain who should be signatory of this MOU, to really have the full picture and have the full actors of the chain. And they also would like to have some payment services, e-commerce and social media platform and technology companies also to join, again, to benefit from their expertise and to link, for example, just for the payment services, as I said, so through this Follow the Money initiative, we already know that some advertising entities are cooperating with some payment services to cut the payment as soon as they know that they remove the ad and they know that there is an issue with a specific ad. So that's it, but I'm happy to, I hope I was on time, and I'm happy to provide more details in the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Angelique. And now I think we can, just before we start the panel, I'd like to say that there's an opportunity for you to write in questions on the right-hand side, and we can ask them to the panelists. And yeah, I'd like to crack on with the panel discussion on how to promote responsible advert placement. Before we get started, could you all maybe introduce yourself quickly for everyone? Philippe?
Okay, sure. I'll start. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Philippe Petru. I'm the Gambling and Affiliate Compliance Director at White Bullet. I come from a tech background and I've been working in the compliance and brand safety space for almost 9 years now, which is forever. Involved in developing and leading marketing compliance, tracking and verification programs for clients in highly regulated sectors. That means working with gambling operators, financial services, regulators, affiliate partners, and the wider ad tech sector, such as ad exchanges, DSP, SSPs, and so on. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And Daniele?
Yes, so I'm Daniele Perrone, Senior Legal Advisor at GBA in the gambling industry since 5 years. And I deal with, of course, European and national legislation affecting the gambling sector, but I'm also following other projects like, for example, this Memorandum of Understanding, which I followed from the beginning. It's now 4 years that we signed the MOU. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Angelique, just for anyone who didn't catch what your job was. Policy officer for the European Commission.
No, I'm a policy officer in DG Growth, so at the European Commission. And so maybe I didn't present just before. So I've been here working for the last 4 years. So I was already here at the signature of the MOU. It was just at the beginning. And just as a background, I come from the French customs.
Thank you very much. And I think I'd like to start things off by just understanding a bit better about how the monitoring of the MOU works, these kind of distinctions between illegal websites and high-risk websites, and how the distinction is made between major branded advertising and all branded advertising, because this is something that pops up quite a lot in these monitoring reports. And Philippe, perhaps you can shine some light on that.
Sure, my pleasure. So the MOU monitoring is basically a landscape analysis project, right? So Angelique was pointing out earlier, it is not focused on gambling specifically. So the monitoring is to understand what kind of advertising is funding IP infringing websites, how that advertising gets there, who are the tech parties involved, who are the affiliates, and so on. and also to see how the profiles of advertising change over time. So for example, you might have fewer major brands and fewer brands in volume overall and so on. But there is no enforcement, and I would just like to state that it's purely to understand the landscape of advertising on IP infringing websites. The distinction between illegal and high-risk websites is deliberately there to help distinguish between, websites that are either the subject of criminal or civil enforcement, or other websites that are on third-party watch lists, such as judicial or administrative watch lists run by the police or other organizations. So in short, illegal websites are those that have been found to be illegal by national judicial, administrative, or enforcement authorities in the EU, whilst high-risk websites have not yet been adjudicated in that way, but they are still verified as highly infringing and popular amongst EU consumers, including by rights holders and our monitoring mechanism. Now, in terms of brands, major brand advertising, just to be clear, is what the industry calls premium advertising, but we avoid using that term premium because it's a rather subjective term and various parties can get offended. We define major brands as the largest companies by ad spend globally. So these are essentially the ones who spend the most on digital advertising, and we extract these from various lists such as Ad Age Top 100, IPG, Millwall Brown, and so on. So the other brands are those that are not major. So in other words, they are not on the list of big spenders in terms of advertising, but they can also be fraudulent, adult, or malicious ads. Now, I see you've pulled up a slide in terms of how gambling advertising has evolved throughout the MOU monitoring period, and this is perfect because I was just about to ask you to pull that up. This is, what we're seeing here is from the first monitoring period, which is 2020 to 2021 to H1 2022, which is the current date. We've seen a drastic and honestly impressive decrease in gambling ads on IP infringing websites in the EU, and this is throughout the monitoring period, as you can see, and both in major and non-major gambling brands. So you could say that gambling is overall dropping on the most well-known, highest in popularity IP infringing websites in the EU. This is a perfect example, in my opinion, of the chain effect that is created by raising awareness, which is something that is happening through this MOU. It's something that is happening through other parties that are doing outreach and are informing brands about what is happening. And this awareness, the chain effect is created by raising awareness to brands and to operators, and this also highlights the benefits of transparency, basically. And this transparency is achieved with the help of tracking technology. So the way I see it, there are three nodes in this chain effect. Number one, gambling operators are made aware of the problem of finding piracy, either through the MOU monitoring or reporting or other parties that make outreach. So for example, we have the various gambling commissions at the EU level. We've got the City of London Police in the UK. We've got the Trust Accountability Group in the US, who are doing outreach to various brands and ad tech parties, informing them, trying to promote the transparency of gambling ad-funded piracy. And all these parties use ad tracking technologies to understand the landscape of piracy and inform gambling operators and create best practices, essentially. Number two is gambling operators become aware that they have a problem. And from my 9-year experience working in this industry, I'm absolutely impressed to say that when gambling operators find out that they have a problem, they choose to take action by implementing ad tracking and verification technologies themselves across their own supply chain to get transparency across their individual situations, right? So this allows them to understand where the problems are, who are the affiliates and ad tech parties responsible for replacing their ads. It helps them quantify the amount of ads that are misplaced. And then from that point on, they can start applying pressure down their supply chain on the affiliates and ad tech parties who are putting them at risk. That's step number two. And step number three, under pressure from these gambling operators and brands, affiliates and ad tech parties choose to implement piracy blocking technology to clean up their inventories, which results in a cleaner ad ecosystem and drastic reductions in gambling ad-funded piracy piracy as we are seeing. And this is obvious from the stats that we're presenting here today. Now, this is clearly a success story, but of course, more can be done to ensure even further reduction by, expanding the landscape monitoring. We've added in 2021, we've added apps, as Angelique was mentioning, and we're tracking that as well. And also by promoting best practices and the wider adoption of ad tracking and piracy blocking technology. And this technology can be applied to provide transparency and block piracy at literally every node in the ad supply chain, from starting with gambling operators through to affiliates and to the wider ad tech sector.
Yeah, Arsen.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. I think you're breaking up.
I thought it was a very interesting point you made about the transparency of the advertising ecosystem. I think that kind of leads in, like, perhaps Daniela, you could explain us why would the EGBA sign this memorandum, and what kind of challenges are facing gambling operators in this area?
Yeah, so at EGBA, we decided to join this memorandum as part of our overall efforts to promote responsible advertising in the European online gambling sector. As an association, we have some obligations which are different from individual signatories, but our goal is to educate and raise awareness on the MOU process, on the MOU work, but not only with our members, but especially with the wider gambling industry also. And that's why we wanted to organize this webinar. And I have to say that at the beginning of the MOU process, we were aware of this issue, but not about the extent of this issue. So how many advertising was misplaced on IPR infringing websites. So we had to learn about it ourselves. And the Commission was very helpful in facilitating the MOU, organizing the meetings in which they invited the MOU signatories, but also outside stakeholders to explain what are the best practices, what are the tools that can be used for this. And as Philip just showed, we found out that the gambling sector had one of the highest percentage of ads misplaced on illegal websites. And we decided to take action on this by joining the MOU. Of course, there is the benefit of ensuring that revenue doesn't go to pirate websites or to criminal activities, but also there is the reputational point of view for operators of not being associated with such websites. And I believe the online gambling industry is relatively young, but it's getting more and more mature with the years. And operators are making more efforts to show that they're responsible companies. They focus more on sustainability. And MOU is included in this area of showing that we are a responsible industry.
You mentioned, I mean, it's been 5 years now since that MOU was signed. Angelique, just how has the work evolved from your point of view over the past 5 years? And has the creation of this MOU, in your eyes, created a greater level of awareness and maturity from the industry regarding this issue and IPR infringing websites?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for the question. So yeah, just to say, it has been, I would have said maybe 4 years only. It's still young initiative. But at the beginning, we had to spend some time also to make the signatories, aware of the issue, of the scope, of the extent of the issue. So we had some work there. So to have all the signatories on the same line, let's say, because some were a bit more advanced maybe. And we are also we took care also to have all the signatories knowing each other. So we took also some time at the beginning to have themselves presenting their own industry or association or company, also the tools they are using, they have developed. Also the initiative, they also outside the MOU they were putting in place. So to have the full picture of the signatories, and we also, as I said, invited different actors at national or EU or international level to combine, to share expertise with them. And just maybe also to say that so the work now is really focusing on the follow-up actions, as discussed when we were preparing the first overview report. So because at the beginning we had a kind of close, to see if the initiative was working well, and the signatories wanted to continue. So it was agreed through this, and it was mentioned in this first report. And then we took action for the next steps. But maybe let me already say that just to mention, to be maybe a bit more concrete now. For example, about sharing expertise, we know that some signatories consider important to share expertise on for example, it was on some new trends. We have some signatories explaining, just mentioning the cloaking effects. Cloaking effect, also that there are some shifts of certain IPR infringing websites from EU countries to non-EU countries, and in particular, actually, in the gambling sector. So this kind of facts, let's say, or of trends are really useful, to be shared. And we also, as I said, each time discuss also the updates on the monitoring studies, on all the different, additional features, let's say, of this methodology, of these studies. And no, I think now it's getting more mature, because putting such initiative in place, it takes time also for, as I said, for having also the trust between the different signatories. But I think we can say that, and I hope that Philippe and Daniele will confirm that at least the discussions are really, going well, interesting, on always acting in good faith, on in good cooperation. And as I said, also the MOU is just offering, kind of framework, but it's an industrial initiative. So we also hope that, let's say, through the MOU, but outside, the general meetings we are hosting twice a year, signatories are also cooperating, bilaterally or at multilateral level, but also, not telling the Commission, but it's also just to take this step to also further increase the cooperation.
And I know you touched a bit on the scope of the MOU there, and I know Philippe mentioned earlier apps. And I just, for people who've seen the report, advertising is only less than 1% on apps, Philippe. And I just want to know kind of why are other sectors kind of more present on these IP infringing apps?
That's a very good question, and there are very good reasons for that. So first of all, let me start by saying that advertising in the app ecosystem is different than on websites, and that's because of the technologies and infrastructures. Those technologies and infrastructures involved in placing advertising are different. It's a different ecosystem altogether, right? So this also results, as you're saying, in the advertising profiles being different on pirate apps compared to pirate websites, although there are some similarities. There are a couple of things that should be mentioned here in terms of the technologies used to place advertising in app. Now, first of all, in-app advertising is done via SDK integration. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but this is the main way of integrating, of plugging in advertising into a particular app, which means this integration means that basically, generally, there are fewer actors involved in the ad supply chain process in app compared to website. SDKs are integrated directly into the app code base of an app, and they act as direct plugins to specific ad tech companies who can then plug in to serve the advertising. Now, this means that there is more control as the ad supply chains are shorter. So there are fewer nodes in the chain where things can go wrong. Yeah, so that's number one. Number two is targeting. User targeting in app is done by device ID as opposed to cookies, which is the case on websites, which is far more accurate and beneficial from an advertiser's point of view. because it allows a more precise identification of users and their preferences, their profiles, their history, their activity, and so on. Now, ad tech parties can also use more precise data points in the app ecosystem, such as which are provided by mobile devices, such as GPS location, device type, operating system, and so on, and also other apps installed on the device, not just web activity via cookies, which is predominant in the web ecosystem and is less accurate and can also be easily polluted, as we all know, through VPNs, through proxies, and so on. So that makes targeting a lot more efficient, user targeting, I should say, a lot more efficient in the app ecosystem. Thirdly, apps provide higher user engagement because there is less ad blocking tech available for apps compared to the web ecosystem, which also results, according to our stats, in a 5 times higher average daily usage for apps compared to websites. And number 4, apps also provide what we call a captive audience, right? Because ads are generally baked in or hard coded within the app functionality, so they're a lot more native, quote unquote, which is a lot harder to avoid than on websites. So in-app advertising is more targeted to users, bottom line is, who it can more accurately identify, as opposed to website advertising, which is a lot of times more contextualized or targeted to a web page content rather than individual users, right? So if we take, for example, if you take a look at a website now, that promotes sport content, for example, such as sport news and so on, or betting news, there is a high likelihood that you will actually be delivered a gambling ad, regardless of whether we have ever expressed online interest in betting. And that's because ad tech parties know that people who are interested in sports are also more likely to place a bet. So they target the advertising on that basis, right? So in the app ecosystem, on the other hand, ad tech parties can more accurately identify the end user and its preferences. Therefore, they can deliver better targeted ads which do not necessarily rely on contextualization of content and the type of content provided by the app. Although, having said that, some contextualization happens within the app ecosystem as well. So that's one of the reasons we are seeing other sectors being more predominant in the app ecosystem, because those are the sectors, the brands and sectors targeted specifically to users as opposed to app content.
So having touched on the role of ad tech there briefly, like what exactly are gambling operators doing to fight Daniele? Like, are they employing ad tech themselves, or what kind of action can they take to prevent their affiliates and their own advertising ending up on IPR?
Yes, so there are many ways operators can stop or lessen the amount of misplaced ads. First of all, operators can impose contractual restrictions on affiliates in their agreements with them and say, if you misplace our advertising on an IPR infringing website, then we terminate the agreement with you, or we withhold the payments for every infringement, for every ad that we found misplaced. And these agreements can also require the affiliates to ensure that the websites they use or their websites as not to include any illegal material or any material in breach of third-party rights. And this can also bring operators to reduce the number of affiliates they work with, or use less affiliates for advertising, and maybe decide to focus on an advertising campaign that focus on quality over quantity. Another thing which is important is for operators to use providers like open ads exchanges or demand service platforms, where the stakeholders are trustworthy and transparent enough to let them control or manage very well the list of websites which they offer for advertising on their platform. Operators also have a white list of good websites on which you know that you can advertise with no problems, and they also use the blacklists of illegal websites, fraudulent or IP infringing, that are made available by some national countries or by some international bodies. And finally, gambling companies can use and do use third parties brand safety tools or services for online brand enforcement and monitoring in order to review how their ads are being used, where they are being used, and if needed, they can take some proactive steps to remove the infringements and protect their brands.
I think moving on from that, the kind of nature of the MOU being a voluntary agreement means that obviously it requires action from the industry to take itself. But we've already got 29 signatories from different sectors, and that includes affiliates and big platforms like Google and of course the EGBA. Angelique, who else should, in your opinion, be joining this MOU? What would have a great impact on it?
Yes, thanks again for the question. So what I'm going to say, just to reflect, the signatories call made during this first report. So the signatories encourage further participation in the MOU by other advertising intermediaries, and I will come back to that, as well as social media platforms, payment industry, and technology companies. And they will welcome, in particular, the participation of companies and trade associations involved in the digital advertising supply chain. As I say, really, because we have already a lot of actors, but there are still some gaps to be filled in. And they highlighted also the need to both, on the demand side, on the supply side of the chain, so at national, EU, on international level, in particular, because now I'm going to be a bit more precise. So they really requested, to extend the MOU to advertising intermediaries, so as they play a role at each stage of the process of placing an ad on the website, and in particular demand side platforms, so DSPs for those who know this one, on supply side platform SSPCs, as well as major mobile and in-app open ad exchanges. So just also to confirm, what just Philippe and Daniele said. They also ask for trading desks, advertising platforms, advertising networks, advertising exchanges for publishers, sale houses, and direct buyers. So now I'm going also for the participant of today. So among the advertisers, the right owners, trademark copyright owners, and including SMEs, very important, and also brand appointed advertising agencies, publishers, and finally, I'm going to that, individual gambling operators, because EGBA is doing a fantastic job through the MOU, to communicate and to raise awareness. But what is also, because as we said, association has specific commitments, but as an association, it's only to participate, to some extent, and to raise awareness, etc., and to provide also some expertise on some feedback, from their members. But what would be very particularly effective now is to have more individual signatories on signatories targeted, in particular, individual gambling operators. That's in the report. you can check. So it's why I think today's meeting is really important to really put the MOU also to the next level. And also just to say that signatories really stressed that their participation, so the MOU really help to spread good practices, facilitate adherence to the MOU, and having new signatories will also help to improve its effectiveness. So really, that's a call from the signatories. I just relay as a commission, as a facilitator, but that's really clear. So it's why I think today's meeting is really important, and I guess you will have the contact details mentioned in the presentation. But don't hesitate for those who are interested to, maybe through EGBA if you are members, or directly through the commission, to contact us, because we are always available to have a chat, to have a meeting, to explain the goals on the commitments, on everything about the MOU, if in case you are willing to sign, or at least maybe just to join at some extent, because that's really to help this initiative go on at the end, to help consumers, to help the EU single market, digital advertising supply chain to be clean.
Thank you, Angelique. And I think it's really interesting that you talk about the kind of role that an individual operator can have in this space. But one of the things that we were really keen on for this webinar was kind of to have an affiliate company on board to discuss their point of view and the role that they play. And weren't lucky enough to have one join us today. And I think they'd be quite an important stakeholder in this discussion. Philippe, what would kind of be your message to affiliates, having monitored this?
Thanks for asking that. It's a very good question, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, there is a lot through all this organization that we're doing, through the MOU, through all these practices and monitoring procedures. There is a lot. We've come a long way now, right, in the last 3 years, and we are now at a point where we expect a lot from gambling operators, which in turn should expect a lot from their affiliate partners. But somewhere in that chain, I would say there is something that is missed out in terms of the relationship between the gambling operators and affiliates, and further on the relationship between the individual affiliate partners and the wider ad tech industry. What we see all the time are, and what I see personally in working in this sector, I see many affiliates who are actually unaware that their campaigns are putting advertiser partners at risk. This is because the majority of the gambling advertising we see on the highest IP infringing websites is placed by gambling affiliates who are buying traffic from third-party ad exchanges and DSPs and set up advertising campaigns through the ad tech sector, which means that they lose control of their ad campaigns when that starts happening, and where their ads end up if the programmatic vendor in this ad supply chain don't employ the required smart tech and tools to exclude pirate publishers. We see this all the time with affiliates who want to do a good job. They want to place responsible ad campaigns next to safe and relevant content, but they work with ad parties who can't ensure that this is the case. And perhaps there is a commercial implications in that. Perhaps running a campaign that doesn't validate IP infringement is cheaper, right? So that makes sense. But with that in mind, affiliates must be able to validate, first of all, their own inventory in the case of direct traffic, and they can easily do this by using piracy blocking and verification tools, which are widely available. But they also have to be very, very careful which ad exchanges and DSPs they work with, and generally choose to work with those partners that do implement tech to detect and avoid targeting piracy, such as dynamic exclusion lists or pixel tracking, blocking, and so on. There are various implementations of this technology that can help do that. We see more and more demand-side partners implement these technologies, so it is simply just a matter of finding those partners and choosing to work with them as opposed to others. In terms of practical steps that affiliates can take to protect IPR, I mean, look, every single brand and every single corporation in this world owns intellectual property, right? From trademarks to trade names to software to databases they run, imagery creators, and so on. So every entity, including operators and affiliates, understand the importance of intellectual property rights. It is not a great stretch to have the same entities understand that if their advertising is funding publishers that breach somebody else's IP rights, then they need to realize that it's unfair, basically, right? So what affiliates can do is they can ensure that the websites and apps they have within their own inventory lists are safe and vetted against piracy. Again, it's easy to run those checks with vendors like White Bullet and others in the space to give them clear, actionable data which they can rely on. And they can also, again, going back to my previous point, be very careful about which demand-side platforms they use, and generally choose to work with those partners that are able to implement tech to detect and avoid piracy.
Thank you very much for that. And I suppose we've covered quite a lot here, but when it comes to the next steps, I know you briefly touched on this, Angelique, the MOU process, but like how exactly will the next steps work? How is this going to evolve? We've heard about ad tech evolving as well, and we've talked about new people signing up, but what exactly do the next steps look like from here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so First, as regards the signatories, so indeed, we are aware that we already know that at least one, we have one candidate, let's say, we call it like that, to sign the MOU, sorry, at the next meeting. And we might have also other, knocking at the door, let's say. So that's one part. On the second part, as I said, we are going to continue the work on the follow-up action to really make them concrete to ensure the signatories are working like in team groups to develop this follow-up actions. So maybe I'm not going into detail, no, but we have already selected on the on the which action where the signatories want really to what they want to prioritize. And finally, we are going to continue to raise awareness, to promote to have communication on the MOU. We are also linking, with other initiatives run by the Commission. For example, in the last meetings, we had colleagues from the Commission, from DG Connect, working on the fake news, disinformation. So that's also linked. Everything is big linked. So we have also some updates on their new code of practice to just sign recently, to also ensure that maybe some signatories are willing also to cooperate on other fronts. We are going to continue, to increase cooperation with, as I said, authorities, public authorities at international level, through, in particular, the World IP Organization, and also through other national authorities willing, to join the discussion, to provide information on their own initiative, and have contact with signatories, to build up on that, to create new work stream, let's say. So we are going to continue, on the monitoring studies. I know that the first one is already under preparation. So no, it's carried out by the EU Intellectual Property Office, and they are taking good care also, as I said, not only to continue on the work on the methodology already done, so to have the evolution over time, but also on the ad revenues. But no, they are getting, to add other pieces, let's say, on the puzzle to have the fullest, full picture. So that's going to be the work for the next month. A lot of work, especially when it should also just to focus maybe 1 second on the mobile app, as Philippe really explained well, what are the really importance of to take care of the mobile apps through this initiative. So that's also going to be a big piece of the work.
Thank you very much, Angelique. And before I get into my final question for all of you, we've got a question from the audience. It's not one that I can quite answer because it's US focused, but considering rapidly growing US market, are there any bodies in the US that are equivalent to the City of London Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit, which provides infringing website lists? I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but in the UK, there is a permanent list of IPR infringing websites that's perhaps not the most agile list. But yeah, I'm not aware of one in the US. Any of you guys aware of one in the US?
There isn't, as far as I know, although there should be, definitely.
So there is a list from the US government published every year, but I will need to check if maybe I could check during the last question if advertising is under the scope. But I could check in 1 second if you want, and I will have the reply.
I think that's the notorious market list, isn't it, Angelique?
Exactly, but I know it's also online, offline, but I don't recall if there is anything on advertising, to be honest. So if you want me, I can check in few seconds, and I'll come back just after.
And is that a kind of permanent list or a fluid list?
Every year, it's published everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question, Boxlov. So finally, just before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you all, if you could pick one measure that would help reduce IPR infringing advertising in the gambling sector, what would it be and why? Daniele, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. So I believe that since we started the work on the MOU, as shown by Philippe with the data on gambling ads, we saw that as soon as you raise awareness and educate the sector on what are the issues and the challenges, the sector then takes action about this. So I believe there should be a closer cooperation between the stakeholders involved. Let's say that the advertising platforms, the affiliates, the gambling operators themselves, because as an industry, we're already used to many self-regulation tools at the national level, European level. And the MOU is just another of these self-regulation tools, can help the industry to show they're responsible. So another point I would like to make is that we've seen major brands for gambling and overall gambling ads being less and less misplaced during the years. But of course, this space on these illegal and pirate websites has been taken by other sectors, which instead increased. So the efforts needs to go all across all sectors. We had some good progress, and I believe that the work will continue smoothly and will improve. And it shows that collaboration at European level can be beneficial for everybody, and the industry is ready to come out and try to solve these challenges.
Angelique?
Now, just to build on what Daniel said, I will say, because I see my list, of the follow-up action, so it will be difficult just to choose one, but I will say just the keyword is cooperation. I know it sounds rather general, but at the end of the day, it's, what is working. Like, as I said, the Commission is offering a kind of platform through the MOU to facilitate the cooperation. But after, it's also at industry level, they should take it in their own. It's what we say. Commission is only a facilitator to make it happen and to make it, becoming very with concrete actions and concrete results. And also, just also maybe for the bigger picture, just to mention that this kind of initiative has been promoted also by the Commission, as working well as others, because this MOU is the only one I'm aware on online advertising, but we have also other MOUs or other names for different initiatives, like I say, on disinformation, on protection of consumers. We have also another MOU related to counterfeiting, between the right holders and the e-commerce marketplaces. We are facilitating. So you see, all this kind of initiative is really supported and facilitated by the Commission, and it has been highlighted as good initiative, good models in the Digital Services Act. Still, under adoption. But that's really, we think, the way forward. So complementing the legislation, industry needs also to take through voluntary initiative to move on. So cooperation.
Thank you, Angelique. And Philippe?
Is there any way we could pull slide 15 up real quick?
Yeah.
I don't want to bore you too much, but just going back to my opening statement, what is the one measure? It's a rather obvious answer to me at this point, because we have seen this in action, and it is evident that it works, even looking at the results of the MOU monitoring program so far, as presented here today. I mean, look, I come from a technical background, so my one solution to this problem is largely based in technology, although there is potentially also a regulatory side to it. The one measure that can solve this problem across the board is first of all transparency, which is provided by the adoption across all ad supply chains of smart technology to provide to prevent ads from funding piracy. Generally speaking, when parties know they have a problem, they will start taking steps to address that problem. Every party in the ad supply chain, as you can see on the slide that is up there now, from advertisers to affiliates, from regulators to advertisers to affiliates, and to the ad tech partners, can use ad monitoring and dynamic blocking technology to ensure safety in terms of ad placement. We have seen clear examples of parties who implement these measures, drastically reducing their ads on pirate publishers. So just to kind of walk you through the flow there, you can see at number 1, you have the EU MOU, you got the Commission using the follow the money and procedure and intelligence 2.0 to further raise awareness and build best practices, right? That informs the parties at number 2 on the right-hand side, which are the gambling operators, those are the advertisers. It creates transparency, it creates a balance between what the regulators know it's happening and what the gambling operators should know it's happening. From that point on, gambling operators can implement transparency providing technology across their own supply chains to find out exactly where the problems are, who are the parties involved, and how to take action. So that basically puts pressure on the ad tech ecosystem, including affiliates and DSPs and ad exchanges, who can implement verification and blocking procedures and lists basically to clean up their inventory. So this process works. This is a flow that works, and we have seen it in action, providing good results. In the same way that all other tracking technologies used today in the ad tech space have been successfully adopted incrementally over time and have become standards. You've got examples like tracking users for targeting or tracking click impressions to quantify engagement and so on. I'm confident that in the same way, dynamic tracking of ad placement and piracy blocking technology can and will become a standard if we push it. I'm confident this will happen as more transparency and guidance are provided, and the adoption of this technology will continue to grow.
Thanks, Stats. I mean, just as we're reaching the end of the hour now, I think I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you, but also just to kind of sum things up, it would seem like ad tech, the role of individual operators and cooperation and raising awareness through things such as this webinar itself are key to bringing that down to 0% in the future, if that's possible. And I'd like to just say, a really big thank you to all of you guys for joining us today on the panel, especially the European Commission for showing up and spreading the awareness, and also for the EGBA for partnering up with us, and for White Bullet for showing all of their findings. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you, and to everyone in the audience as well for joining us and listening today. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.